So here's a bargaining tactic for you. Okay, so you start talking to the seller who's got the game you really want, and you say, hey, did you know that the best things in life are free? Well, lucky you, lucky me, that game you got there, I would consider to be one of the best. And so I'll be willing to take it off your hands for the price of free. Thank you, you're welcome, and it's been a pleasure doing business with you. Now, this tactic hasn't actually worked for me, but if it works for you, be sure to let me know. The thing is, everyone loves a good deal, and while free is always going to be the best price, I think a lot of us would define a deal as any time we spend less money than we thought we might have had to, and when that happens, it feels good. I mean, it just hits the spot. It kind of reminds me of if you've ever been petting a dog before and you're scratching away, and all of a sudden you get to just the right spot and the dog's leg starts going wild. Well, whatever the human equivalent of that is, that's what we're doing when we get a good deal. All right, so what are some of the ways that we get really good deals on games? Well, let's start with one of the most common examples being garage sales. And sure, garage sales maybe aren't as easy to find good deals at as they used to be a handful of years ago, but we still have our stories and there's always the chance going forward. And typically it goes down like this. So you'll walk up to a garage sale and they've got all sorts of stuff strewn across their lawn or wherever it is that they're having it. And you notice some video games. So you go wandering over and you take a look and you realize they've got something awesome and probably don't realize how much it's worth. So then what do? You get real excited, right? Wrong. You gotta keep your cool. In fact, quick little test, which of the following would be the better way to react? Option number 1, oh my goodness, Super Nintendo games, Super Mario, Super Metroid, this is super, how much? Or option number 2, you play it really cool, very casual. You pick up the games and you slowly flip through them like you're going through your junk mail. And then you say, very casually, how much for these old games? Once you've paid for the game or games and gotten back to your car, your house, or whatever, then you can cut loose and start celebrating. Do the Macarena, the dog leg thing, or whatever it is you like to do. Now, with that said, some people kind of see a moral issue with paying them way less than what the game is worth. Now, if you want, you can mention to the seller what the game is worth, and maybe out of the kindness of their heart, they'll just be like, well, you know, you were really honest. I'm going to give it to you for this price anyways. You seem like somebody who would enjoy it. And I have heard of that happening before. I mean, in a lot of cases, when somebody has a garage sale, it's not some sort of business venture. They're just trying to get crap out of the house. So they might be willing to let something go for a smaller price. Now, when you get to flea markets, they sometimes take things a little bit more seriously. I mean, after all, they've migrated from their own front yard to a big giant parking lot somewhere. What's nice about flea markets is that you have a ton of sellers to choose from. Problem is, that also means there's a ton of buyers there sniffing around looking for stuff. And the common wisdom when it comes to flea markets is you have got to get there early, in some cases before some of the people have even set up. Those rare days of the week where you don't have to get up early, screw them. Wake up even earlier than you normally do. Quick little story for you. The very first flea market that I ever went to where I was looking for games, this was years and years ago, I show up super early. I can't even remember exactly what time it was. So I show up and I look around and you know what I find? A whole lot of nothing. Not even nothing as in nothing good, but literally nothing. Nobody had set up yet. And I just thought to myself, what have I done? So I go back to my car and I take a nap. I wake up 3 hours later and then venture back to the flea market. And luckily, I actually did find something that day. What I found was a region-free Sega Saturn. And the weird thing about it is the person who was selling it had no clue what it was. I mean, a region-free modified Sega Saturn, that's something you'd find at a specialty shop. I mean, whoever did that knew what they were doing. And how did the person end up with that thing? Well, I didn't ask where it came from. I just asked how much they wanted for it, to which they said $35, to which I said, how does 30 sound? They said good. I purchased it and went on my merry way. Now, was it worth the 5 hours I spent that day? Probably not, but at least I came away with something. I think the lesson learned there is that you gotta evaluate how much your time spent is worth to you in comparison to the deals you're getting on the games. Really, I think the best way to do this is to just have fun doing the game hunting, where your enjoyment isn't dependent on what you come away with at the end. You're either spending time with friends or it's just something enjoyable for you to do by yourself. I think my buddy Aaron over at Pixel Game Squad is a great example of this. Those people know how to have some fun while game hunting. And like Aaron always says, if you have fun, the deals will come. Okay, maybe he's never actually said that before, but I bet you he'd probably agree with that. But if you're like a lot of retro gamers, then you've inevitably probably bought some games online before, which unfortunately means paying market value in a lot of cases. But sometimes you can get lucky and score something for lower than what you thought you might have had to pay for it. Quick little story for you, Saturn Bomberman. Now, as a lot of you may know, the price of this game sucks. In fact, I'd actually recommend getting the Japanese import version, but I saw this pop up on eBay years ago, and the price was way lower than what it was going for, and so I looked at the seller and the feedback seemed to be okay, and so I thought to myself, well, I guess I'll take a chance on this. And believe me, it was taking a chance, because the picture of it looked like it was taken with an old cell phone. I mean, you could barely even tell that this is what it was. But I thought, okay, let's just roll the dice here and see what I get. And what I got was a game that was in beautiful, well taken care of condition. Okay, so next up I want to talk about what I like to call retroactive deals. And the beauty of retroactive deals is that you can do it with basically any game you own. Because all you do is you look at a game, think about what you paid for it back when you got it, and then think about what the price for it is now, which is likely higher, and you can think, yeah, you know what? That actually does kind of feel like a deal now. And is this kind of a reach? Sure, but people like to look at their games and think all sorts of various positive thoughts, so boom, there you go. But when it comes to the absolute best retroactive deals, how about games you got as a kid? Not only did you not have to pay for the game now as an adult, you probably didn't have to pay for it back then as a kid either, since it was probably a gift from somebody. I also think it's a good question to ask whether a deal is relative to its market value or what you personally think it's worth. If it's relative to what you think it's worth, then some games may just never be considered a deal. You bought a really bad game for $5. Was it a deal? Nope, it was a punishment. But whatever the best deals you've ever gotten on games are, I want to hear them, and conveniently enough, that's this video's question. So be sure to share those stories down below, and I will see ya in the next video.
He's the retro bird, yeah, and he's talking about video games. He's